So it's time to get stuck into the papers once again. Here with me to review them this morning are the journalist and broadcaster Vidisha Manmata and editor at Spike, Tom Slater. So welcome back to you two. Third time running, still full of energy though. I can just tell looking at you. So Vidisha, we're going to start with the Daily Star, which is not something I say that often, I'll be honest, but they are going with the energy crisis, aren't they? On their edition, they're suggesting that people might not be able to afford to switch on their festive lights this Christmas, but they, in their headline, they make a bit of a joke. This year I want a pony and 50 kilowatts per hour of off-peak lecky, please, Santa. Making a joke, but about a very, very serious issue.
Yeah, I have to say 50 kilowatts per hour was never on my Christmas card list when I was a young child sitting on Santa's knee, but unfortunately we do have to think about these things these days. I chose that front page simply because it's so shocking to see a heads up from a major newspaper at the beginning of September warning of literally a dark Christmas. So they are actually saying very seriously in the deeper article that councils, local businesses, even households are not doing Christmas lights this year because of the cost of energy price rises. Bars, pubs, cafes, hospitality venues who make the majority of their income from the lead up to Christmas and the Christmas party period will be facing doubled or tripled energy bills that ordinary households themselves are cutting back, not just because of energy prices, but also because of the cost of living, because of inflation, because of the squeeze on wages and rights. So prices have risen, but wages have not risen. And if you add all of that together, of course, this is about much more than Christmas. Christmas is something we're looking ahead to. It posits that the next year, the next 2 years are going to be very difficult indeed, and that this is going to hit all the different areas of society. So you have private businesses, you have enterprise, you have entertainment, and then you have all of that filtering down to ordinary family life.
I know it's so far-reaching, isn't it, Tom? And in fact, in one of the previous hours, we talked about a survey in the Eye that said that more than half of people are saying they're going to turn the heating off, even though they're cold. So a very big challenge for the new Prime Minister. We will find out who they are on Monday, of course. And the Daily Telegraph goes with that, don't they? They suggest that if it is Liz Truss, which the polls suggest it will be, she's got an energy plan to wheel out almost straight away.
Yes, as you say, this is the sort of top line of this piece, that within 24 hours, if indeed Liz Truss turns out to be our next Prime Minister, that she would present her energy plan to the Cabinet and then be able to essentially get the ball rolling on her relief packages, essentially. We've already heard so far essentially only really about the tax cuts, about the cuts to VAT, about getting rid of the national insurance rise, about cancelling any of the proposed rises that are already there. But in terms of actually helping households, that was never really going to touch the side. So there's a big open question as to what Liz Truss will do. She's gestured vaguely towards more support being on the way. She's been quite limited in her campaign as far as she's made it so much about how this should be about being a tax-cutting Tory government in that way that definitely appeals to the Tory base, but without much hint of what is actually coming. So not much more detail here, I think it's fair to say, but just more indication that we will hear more as of next week, and a good reminder of how the process is going to play out, with the announcement around lunchtime on Monday, the Prime Minister then resigning, and then on Tuesday, the new Prime Minister having that audience with the Queen at Balmoral, and then taking office. So it's all go, but at the same time, there's still just such a big question hanging over this new Prime Minister, despite the fact we've had what feels like an endless Tory leadership race. Any clear sense of what the programme is going forward still eludes us.
Well, that's right, and lots of people are already getting worried about their very high bills come October the 1st when the price cap is increased. So it'll be fascinating to see what is announced. And meanwhile, Liz Truss makes headlines on the front of The Guardian as well, doesn't she, Vidisha? Police chief, one police chief certainly, suggesting that her plans for law and order aren't up to scratch.
Yeah, this is a really interesting take because, of course, Liz Truss has not yet been announced as the new Prime Minister. The votes are still being counted. We're not going to know any of this until next week. But Tom said a couple of hours ago that there isn't a huge amount of appetite for Truss at any level of society behind the scenes or in front of the scenes. And I do think that's true. So you've got Chief Constable Richard Lewis, very high up in the police force, very long-standing police officer, saying that Truss's proposed plans for the police, they're full of sound bites, they're meaningless, they are constructed to appeal to the public in a very short-form way. He's written an interesting article saying that, look, he's been serving for such a long time, he knows what works. For example, long-term interest in solving society's problems, long-term investment. And he's very against what Truss is saying, because he says that, well, she says we should go back to basics. What does that mean? The government have a problem around crime and law and order, but they tend to throw the police under the bus for that. Why is Truss talking about appointing 20,000 new police officers? Because actually that would simply replace the number of officers that were axed in the last 10 years. Why is she talking about having crime targets and police commissioners, which were after all the Tory party invention in the first place, reducing homicide by 20% when it's already reduced by 12%, and creating targets, and then creating a sort of school target leaderboard for which force is performing well and which force is underperforming, so politicising policing. And he's saying that none of those things work. Of course, the Book of Common Sense says long-term investment, long-term interest, and long-term integrated views of society work much better than sound bites.
Yeah, and again, Liz Truss might say, if she were to be the winner of this contest, you will hear a lot more detail about all my plans at a later date. But we were talking about the police then, Tom, and you've picked out an article in the Daily Mail, their coverage of this report into Cressida Dick, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, standing down, very critical of Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor.
Yes, I mean, it accuses him of an abuse of power in relation to the circumstances in which Cressida Dick stood down. It seems to hinge on one particular meeting in which he's alleged to have essentially suggested to Cressida Dick that she would sack all of the officers who were then under investigation at Charing Cross Police in relation to, I think it was misogynistic and sexist conduct. She said she couldn't do that as a matter of due process. The relationship continued to sour to the point where he essentially said, issued a veiled threat, essentially, that if she wasn't going to get the Met's house in order, that she needed to go in essentially an hour after. That's when she announced her resignation. This was a report commissioned by Priti Patel, the head of the Home Office. I mean, it's a difficulty insofar as, you don't really know which side are worse than the other in this case. I think both of them have failed London to quite a significant degree. Cressida Dick did preside over a string of scandals that she showed no signs of being able to get a grip on. Okay. But at the same time, has Sadiq Khan's leadership been that great? Probably not either. Yeah,
lots of questions there. He called the report clearly biased and ignoring the facts, so still not a great deal of agreement there. We're out of time. So lovely to have your company this morning. Vidisha and Tom, thanks very much indeed.